what I've seen firsthand is that, unchecked, unmanaged, that can create a real visibility problem. A kind of paralysis, because anybody who tries to look at that CRM and make sense of what's in it and act upon it can find themselves, very confused by what they see.
This is where vendors try to sell attribution as this silver bullet to, oh, well, you can track these touch points here and give it this amount of value based on what they do. And it's like, it's all farcical. I'm sorry. Hi everyone, welcome back to Demand Decoded. Dan here with you as usual with Phil in the studio.
Hello.
And this is a bit of a funny topic that we have today, but a true one, I think, nonetheless, which is why more data has actually made marketing worse. Not a phrase you hear too often, as marketers and, us in business generally obsess over data, can't get enough data. Data is, the god of everything in marketing. But actually, in this episode, we're going to break down some of the different types of data that have actually, we think, led to marketing becoming worse off, and it really damaging some areas of your go-to-market in a lot of cases, and things that you need to look out for and potentially revisit and overcome.
Yeah, absolutely right. Not often you hear data described as a bad thing. Typically data is a valuable asset to have. It's got incredible importance and people trust it, and therefore it's very useful to you. But I'm with you. I think that marketers in particular have a challenge when it comes to data. We'll dig into some of the nuances of it, but at a high level, it's the fact that what's in the data is increasingly detached from what is working and what is happening when buyers go through the process that they go through. So, data runs the risk of tearing marketers further and further away from what is really going to move the needle on their results and their impact. So it presents this big challenge in terms of how you manage it, factor it into what you're doing, interpret it, etc., etc., etc. So I think there is real substance to that statement, although it's not just that data is bad. Of course it isn't. It's what data does for you when you've got it that can be, a challenge to be addressed.
Yeah, I think the point is that there is just so much data now from every single software vendor that you work with. Every single piece of software that you have comes with its own insights, its own data, its own reporting. You can import loads of data. Like, there's a lot of different areas of data that we now have access to in marketing. And I suppose the question to answer is like, is that actually making us better?
Yeah.
Before we get into the podcast today, here's a quick word from our sponsors, HubSpot. Think about listening to this podcast right now. You're probably multitasking and catching 70, maybe 80% of it. Now flip that and imagine only catching 20%. That'd be pretty crazy, right? Yet most businesses only use 20% of their data. All the important details in call logs, emails, and chats just left floating in digital space. HubSpot gives you access to those insights to help your business grow, because when you know more, you grow more. Visit HubSpot.com to get the full picture today.
Is the data you're getting from a platform actionable, valuable, correlated with what produces results in your business, aligned to the results you want as a business, and available to you? There's so many issues with the abundance of data that exists. I get particularly sort of frustrated when I see how much the integrations that exist between systems only makes a fragment of the promised data available to you. That's a particular pain point that I see, which is like you say, every vendor comes along with big promises around the data, but if it means you've got to be hopping between their system and another system, that's not incredibly powerful, data in a usable sense.
Yeah.
So there's loads of ways that abundance of data, promises of data and its efficacy, and the visibility into the data can be a challenging thing for marketers.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we've kind of sectioned this off into different areas of data, and we're going to talk about each one. And the first one is the kind of accumulation and mess of CRM data plus like personnel data, I suppose, from your CRM platforms like Zoom Info, Apollo, etc., etc. All of that data that is just, in a lot of cases, a complete mess.
Yeah, yeah. And I suppose what you're alluding to there is the fact that CRM databases have a tendency to only grow and proliferate. More and more records, more and more companies, more and more contacts, more and more activities, more and more duplicates, more and more stale data. There's lots of challenges with that. And what I see, what I've seen firsthand is that, unchecked, unmanaged, that can create a real visibility problem.
Yeah.
A kind of paralysis, because anybody who tries to look at that CRM and make sense of what's in it and act upon it can find themselves, very confused by what they see. It can manifest in terms of marketing, not knowing who they can or can't campaign to, sales knowing who they can and can't prospect to, or who they have and haven't prospected to, sales activity, masking marketing influence over contacts and companies and so on. So yeah, the influx of data tends to produce a harder to use and harder to understand CRM. That is, unless you are very, very intentional and both proactive and reactive, i.e. continuously on top of how your CRM is structured. This is a particular issue that I've seen firsthand recently, and I've had a bit of a change of heart in terms of how I think we should view this issue. I'm all for slowing down CRM growth, as in, it doesn't really benefit any organization to import swathes of contact data weekly or monthly. And we know this because if you look at the conversion rate through your funnel, through the stages of your life cycle, you will see how narrow they are, how poor they are, which is simply a reflection of the fact that you are not being targeted enough about your prospecting work, about your outreach. That is spray and pray type mentality. So it's definitely worth thinking about, what does our process look like in terms of the speed of growth of the CRM. But I'm definitely viewing things now as, think of the contacts in your CRM as an addressable market, not yesterday's import versus next week's import versus the import last week, not the group of people going into that sequence or this campaign or that, not these little micro groups of people that get re-imported, duplicated, deleted, totally messed up. But think of the CRM as a growing audience within which you can generate demand and apply, a segmentation, a labeling, and a grouping strategy that works regardless of when the data came in. That, I think, is a big potential unlock for businesses who are in this sort of high cadence, source some data, run a campaign, fire off some messages, that, and then fret about the fact that they've got a bunch of data that's not engaged, relatively low quality, could be going stale. There's a pivot, which is to say, change how you think about that, change about how you frame that, and make that data more manageable, more usable for you.
Yeah. The CRM is so important, right? Because everybody in the business, to a certain extent, should be using the CRM. At least, the commercial functions will be in the CRM, looking all the way from the first moment you discover a lead all the way through until how you're actually engaging them as a customer. Like, are they churning, are they expanding, etc., etc. Like, it is such an important tool that just gets muddied by so many different in so many different ways. Like the thing is with vendors that sell data, even like just lists and things, like the promise is amazing, right? Let me give you 2,000 of your top accounts, like I'll give you all of their email addresses of the C-suite and the VPs, etc. It's like, okay, great. People go ahead, they import the data. There's no tagging, as you say. There's no clear identification of why they're in the CRM, where they came from, what we should do with them. And sometimes, like, not every CRM makes it easy to do that.
Sure.
But you do, like you say, you have to be very intentional about when you are perhaps doing something new. Like you've just adopted Zoom Info, you've just, done 2 massive trade shows last year. Understanding and thinking ahead about how you're going to segregate that data in your CRM compared to everything else is a really, really crucial thing to do, to actually give yourself clarity in like 12 months time when you want to measure the impact of one of those things, or think about why on earth that contact is in there.
Yeah.
And like its source isn't just Dan's import.
Yeah, well, funny. That is a classic name. You go to the import section of a CRM and you see a bunch of lists imported, and yeah, that Dan's import is a very common thing to see.
Yeah.
And I don't think it matters how hard you try. Naming your imports isn't going to build a structured CRM that you can actually, confidently segment and work against. It has to go deeper than that, down to the contact level, to properties and information that allow you to confidently work with that data. I think regardless of when it came into the CRM, just because a contact came in via, an import or, a pull of data from a system on one day and not on another day, if they're your ICP, in the relevant sector and the conditions are right, they're a workable contact. So yeah, it's that sort of the name of the import being the only thing that tells you when and why they were imported is a really limited way to go about it. CRM needs design at the end of the day.
Yeah,
it's an ongoing process, but you need to apply data that allows you to run segmentation effectively and quickly, without the doubts that creep in. And that's what a lot of the challenges that we hear about are. It's the doubts that they have about the trustworthiness of the data. Like, well, yeah, that is fixed at a foundational level, and it can be done. I think there is, funnily enough, it completely makes sense that we've integrated marketing and sales activity and data on a single database, right? A person is a person. Having one record of them in your CRM makes total sense. And yet there is a tension there as well, which is, more and more marketing is becoming about reaching people whilst they're anonymous to you, building mental availability, building preference, building trust, creating, exposure to your brand, your solution, word of mouth, all these activities that reach buyers when they're not in market and they're probably anonymous to you, and getting them to come to you, Okay, there's also making sales more effective when they go out, but typically we're trying to get people to come and raise their hand. Those contact records that are pulled in from those data providers are in most cases low intent, right? Low intent contacts, cold, no expressed interest, no visible intent. Of course, if you can move to an intent-based method of pulling contacts in, then that's going to be a better way to do it. We'll talk about that in a second. But doing all of this in one system does create challenges for sales and marketing, because typically, sales doing their prospecting work will pull in low intent contacts from their data provider, creating that contact record before marketing's had an opportunity to draw them in, via the demand generation, demand creation, demand capture methods that they're using. So the challenge there becomes, how do you monitor and measure the marketing side of that purchase process when the contact record is already there, the original source is import or integration, the lifecycle stage is already SQL, and you've already sent them a load of messages one-to-one. Creates a real reporting challenge, which is part of this issue.
Yeah. Well, and we'll get on to attribution shortly, but this is then like the laughable nature of a lot of attribution models, because they are framed as like the silver bullet to all of these problems. You know, sales are doing their own thing with this contact, but so are marketing. Everyone's kind of working this contact. So how does marketing actually prove its value to this? Because unlike sales, you don't actually track the pipeline through to revenue and, you know, get commission based on that. So you have to prove your worth in other ways, and this is where vendors try to sell attribution as this silver bullet to, oh, well, you can track these touch points here and give it this amount of value based on what they do. And it's like, it's all farcical. I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so incomplete, so, you know, inaccurate as to be useless. It does more harm than good. We've discussed the challenges
Well,
there.
that's a key point to this episode in general, which is a lot of the data that we now have access to is doing more harm than good, because it's just not telling you the true picture of what's happening.
Yeah, we're in an era where platforms do a very good job of convincing us that they hold the key to, you know, some aspect of growth, and that their data is the data to optimize around. You know, we've had this for a long time with advertising platforms like Google and LinkedIn, but now I see it in ABM platforms, intent data platforms, attribution platforms. They're all going to make the case that their data is the data to, you know, live by and to optimize for. But we've seen for a long time that the in-platform metric is very often not correlated with the business KPI that you're seeking to move, and optimizing for it, well, only optimizes your use of that platform. At best, that produces improved performance of that platform. At worst, it moves you away from driving business results because your investments are misaligned and misplaced relative to what your audience will respond to.
On your point around doubts about data, like I've seen this and heard it presented like numerous times, like, oh, we've got this data report here, but we maybe think it's like 80% accurate. Like that's not really good enough. And I've also seen that working in separate systems, say you have Salesforce and HubSpot, creates its own issues as well. Like, whilst it's great to integrate those two things, I've seen sales leaders pulling reports from Salesforce because that is the tool that they work in. But then I've seen marketers trying to pull similar reports to tell a similar story from HubSpot, but the two are different. They're getting different. Like, I can guarantee people listening to this are like, yeah, I've seen that, done that before. Like, because this is where I think, as you say, intentional design, intentional integration in that case, having like system admins or like revenue operations people that understand how to use these tools and can like govern them and understand how to report accurately, not just based on properties that you think are right, is just so important.
Very, very critical and increasingly valuable in, you know, in the modern, in the world we live in. Those disconnected systems, Salesforce, HubSpot, for example, you know, that they further sort of justify or evidence the idea that the people that say the contacts that sales work are distinct from the contacts that marketers work. And there is actually a lot of truth to it, but it shouldn't be the case, right? There should be high alignment between who marketing and sales work. So there's critical requirements to make sure that you, as you said, design your integration or your systems or your reports to reflect the true reality of your data, and find out that the right data is flowing if you're not in the position to be on one platform. But even when you're on one platform, you've got to be ready to address reporting and data challenges that arise because you've now got everything on a single object, a single record, and your processes might be slightly different. There's definitely challenges there, but overcomable with support and design.
If you're listening to this right now, you're probably doing what every other B2B marketer is doing, asking, how do I get my brand cited in ChatGPT? How do I show up in Gemini, Perplexity, Claude? And at Blend, we help you do exactly that. We engineer visibility in AI search for B2B companies. We build the content, implement the technical optimization, and track your performance across every major AI platform. So when buyers are researching solutions like yours, your brand gets recommended. We know how to engineer visibility in AI search because we built a framework and proved it on ourselves first. And this took months of experimentation, but in the end, it delivered 470 high value prompt appearances, 80% citation rate across prompts, and 250% more AI sourced leads. We proved the framework, and now we're starting to roll it out across customers who are seeing similar results. So if you want to dominate AI search in your category, visit blendb2b.com to learn more about our AI search services. If you're enjoying this show, let me recommend another one from the HubSpot podcast network, Billion Dollar Moves, hosted by Sarah Chen Spellings. Sarah sits down with the leaders actually building category-defining businesses and pulls out the strategies and hard lessons that shaped their success. Her recent episode with Taiwan's CEO explores how he's reinventing a 77-year-old family business for modern markets. Whether you're scaling or transforming your own business, there's a lot to learn here. Listen to Billion Dollar Moves wherever you get your podcasts. So then we get into attribution, which is formed from the CRM in a lot of cases to actually drill down in your CRM, like how you attribute certain leads, certain contacts, certain deals in particular ways. But attribution data goes beyond the CRM, right? There are attribution vendors now, attribution software out there that are, again, selling attribution software as the silver bullet that will tell you exactly where your marketing investments are currently going, how effective they currently are at bringing in, you know, your best value deals with the best CAC, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But again, like, that is really, really hard to actually trust 100% and use for ongoing investments, because we know that so much of the buyer journey is completely invisible to us. Most of it, actually. Can't remember the exact stat from the Gartner study off the top of my head, but most of the buyer journey is done independently before buyers ever reach out to a business or sales.
Yeah.
None of that is trackable in a lot of cases. If it is trackable, it's dependent on, you know, cookies being accepted, different actions being taken that you can't guarantee all of your buyers are going to take. It's pot luck if they do, really.
Yeah.
So attribution can often misdirect marketers as to where they should invest, you know, their next $1,000.
Yeah, completely. It's interesting. I think there's two sides to that story, funnily enough. One is there are businesses that believe that their marketing in a way that is completely measurable by attribution.
Yeah.
Their go-to-market is all about exposing prospects to assets, campaign assets, and tracking interaction with it. And that's their whole, you know, go-to-market model. They believe that they operate in a way that everything that they do is measurable in an attribution sense and therefore can be credited to a deal, and you can get a sense of which campaign is working and which, you know, what's doing what. Funnily enough, however, that's not the reality of the world that they are operating in. And their campaigns are far from the only thing which is influencing a prospect prior to coming into pipeline. And so there's a bit of a sort of a cycle, which is to say that, you know, they'll be using attribution data to report campaign effectiveness, to continue doing campaigns to use attribution data and not break out of that loop. But we know buyers are constantly exposed to brands, information, ideas, word of mouth, referrals, etc., etc., etc. So that's as far from the truth as it can get. On the other side, for businesses that know that, the buying journey is vast compared to that kind of, theory, there's this issue that you simply cannot reliably, accurately, correctly track most of what the buyer's doing. I've never really thought about how you go about developing, like, coding an attribution platform, but I'm thinking about it now, because at the end of the day, everything comes down to making a connection between, an impression, which can usually be tracked
Yeah.
on
Insights tag. Yeah.
on a device, which can be traced to some sort of an IP address, which
Yeah.
can be associated to a company, and then you can maybe infer that, well, the person at the company that might be looking at a thing like that could be this person or that person. But you can see how this is all based on a few very, very simple, universally used data points that are not reflective of all the data points, because they're only the ones where the tracking is either permitted or enabled, either at the individual level or at the company / IP address level, and are not the ones that are not. And then even when it is enabled, it's an impression. It's nothing more than that. It's an impression that's attributed to a company, that's attributed to a contact, that's attributed to your deal, that's attributed to your marketing budget decisions.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. I do think in some cases there's attribution that is, well, actually most attribution is usable. It's like it's good information at the marketing level to give you signals about what's happening as far as you can see, at least. I look at Fibbler for example. You heard of
I have
Fibbler?
indeed, yeah.
Or aware of it? So like a lot of B2B businesses are running LinkedIn ads, and if you are running a highly like account-based targeting play, then Fibbler's gonna help you understand how much frequency, like how many times those target accounts are seeing and engaging with your ads, and then distribute that data into your CRM so you can report on it further from there. That's very useful data.
Yeah.
If I'm running an ABM play, to understand how engaged those accounts are is really, really great. And the fact I can see that in my CRM with the deal data, like the contacts in there, very, very useful. But what I'm not going to do is use an attribution platform, no matter which one it is, and take that 100% gospel and say, this attribution platform is saying we're getting our best customer acquisition costs from this channel. So that means if we put in, 100K more into that investment, we should get this ROI out the back of it. Because one, things don't scale like that. And two, again, back to your point, it misses the rest of the buyer journey, the things that are happening that might have driven people to go to that channel in the first place and reach out to you. Like, it's great signals for marketing to use to see if you're on the right lines, to like fact check your thinking, but it's a risky game to play, just taking exactly what your attribution software is saying and making investment decisions based on that.
Yeah. What you described there is actually the fundamental model that applies to all of this discussion, as to whether more data is useful to you, valuable to you, helpful to you, or not. And ultimately, that is with any piece of data, from a source, from a vendor, attribution, contacts, etc. You've got to, as marketers, one, understand the limitations of it. Understand what it can and can't show you and tell you and track and see. Know that there are blind spots within it. Know how it's based on inference and assumption to some degree, if it is or not. For example, understand its limitations. Know how the data that you're getting or that it gives you is relevant to what you're doing. How are you going to use it, and how are you going to apply it, and where and when are you going to analyze it, and what will it inform, so that you have a plan for that data as it comes into your system. And crucially, understand where in the marketing process it has its place. Is this a marketing uh, metric with which to inform channel-based improvements, or is this a leadership dashboard KPI? Like where does this exist in your landscape of data and measurements and metrics? And the issue that I see simply is that so many marketers are surrounded by data, sources, pipelines, feeds, with no ability to demonstrate that sort of structured use of it. So like, it's great having all this data, great having all this ABM data, attribution data, impression data from over here, contact data from over here. Wonderful, have it all flooding at you. But if you actually haven't got the ability to say, this is how and when and where and why we use this data or that data, it's not doing anything for you. It's just making life harder, because you're going to be having more conversations internally about the mess, about the doubt, about the confusion, and it's not going to be helping you to think strategically about how to drive your business KPIs.
Yeah. And software attribution only tells you what you're currently doing. It doesn't tell you what your market are saying about your brand, what the perception is about your solution in the market, how they are discovering content in like your industry. It doesn't tell you anything apart from what you're currently doing and what you're currently investing in. So this for me is actually really, when it comes down to the point of, what is the point of you? Like, what is the point of you as a marketing leader in your position? Because maybe are you just not needed? If you have software attribution that's going to tell you exactly where you should invest and tell, maybe even notify you on a Monday morning, here's where you should put your next $50,000 this week. Like, well, I can just give that to an intern, right? And get them to execute that based on my attribution software. Like, this is basically the job of a marketing leader. It's taking your attribution data, taking the signals from that, but combining it with all of the other things. The market insights you have, the buyer intelligence that you're getting from sales discovery calls and consultations and like demos and everything like that, combining it with self-reported attribution, combining it with all the other signals that you might get from like customer success and everything, basically wrapping all of that together and then making your strategic decision based on all of that. And like coming to the conclusion yourself ultimately. Like, that is the point.
Yeah, that in some ways, audience insight, research, voice of customer, things that you can get from analyzing sales calls, in bulk, commissioning research from Winter or other organizations relevant to your sector, understanding what your buyer is saying about themselves, the category, you, is as valuable as a lot of the data that we can get our hands on. And I would say it's more valuable than quite a bit of it.
Yeah, I'd agree.
And being able to collect and take that in, process that into a plan, which isn't based on, hard, static, fixed like models. Human behavior doesn't follow a set of rules that always applies. Taking that information in, plus the other data that you can obtain or have obtained, and building a strategy using it, that's the human element.
Yeah.
Now, as I say this, I can hear people saying, "Oh, we can probably have like some sort of sophisticated AI marketing manager pretty soon that takes in all of that data, processes that into a strategy, looks at all the data that's available, and therefore optimizes the budget and the spend." And yeah, I mean, the hope and the hype around AI is enormous, and it's doing some incredible stuff, and it's getting more and more sophisticated, and smart marketers are using it in more and more powerful ways.
Yeah.
And if marketing followed the rules that were laid out in the data only, then sure, you could probably put your marketing on AI rails and win. But the world we live in isn't like that, and I think it's therefore a bit less realistic to think that we can replace what marketing managers are doing with AI in the near term. But it's that audience-based decision making that sometimes goes, if not against the data, just doesn't have data to support it. That's where we play our role.
Yeah. The thing is, if it was that easy, right, that we could just go and get an attribution tool and it would tell us exactly what to do, then every business would be flying.
Well, exactly.
Like, there would be no businesses like entering liquidation. Like, every business would be just growing astronomically. Like, quarter on quarter results would just be off the absolute charts. And ultimately, that's why businesses end up in the trap to get these attribution tools, because that's what it's sold as. But if it was that easy, then why is it that businesses that have access to all of this data, have access to all this attribution, still find themselves failing?
Yeah, exactly. You know, and you've said it, that there are plenty of businesses who have this data at their fingertips in abundance, and yet it's very common that it doesn't make the marketing managers or the rest of leadership feel like they are any more in command of their success or results. They're very often still highly dependent on one motion or another and struggling to identify how to branch out, how to diversify from it whilst it declines in its efficacy, with cost per lead going up and cost per, all the data in the world doesn't directly have the effect of giving businesses the knowledge with which to be successful.
Yeah. We also have to consider different industry variations here as well, because you see a lot of case studies from software attribution companies, but most of them are SaaS businesses that they are talking about having the success with, because their sales cycle, their like research, discovery, evaluation process, the buying journey is a bit more predictable perhaps than other industries. And just the fact, like, the actual evolution of that buyer, when they come in, they have a demo, it's quite predictable, it can be the same. If you're in an industry where you're selling multi-million-dollar contracts that require extensive consultation periods and things like that, attribution software is going to be very tricky to give you anything, basically. So there is a consideration to make there.
Yeah, I think if something that you've heard in your business is along the lines of, well, this platform only gives us data over 90 days or 180 days, and therefore we need a solution for that, or better, a better source of data. It's like you've already kind of lost, because that you're not going to get, it's you can't fill in the gaps on that. And even if the cookie window was longer, you've still got issues with who has them and who doesn't, and who deletes them and who doesn't. It's like that sort of looking at the situation, looking at the symptoms of the situation, going, well, it's the window of time for which we get the data that's the issue, is, I think, misinterpretation of what the issue is, which is the buying journey is not the buying journey that can be accurately seen in this context.
And something I just wrote down before I forgot it was not having enough data, which is often an issue. If you are an upmarket vendor, company that are selling to, an exclusive like 500 accounts, you probably don't have enough data to make your attribution software attribution data actually like meaningful. There's not enough proof in there.
If there's no pattern, if there's no signal in the noise, then it's more or less useless to you. And at low numbers, it's very hard to get, statistically relevant information out of any system. Doesn't matter whether that's, page views for A/B tests or attribution systems for, campaign measurement. The other issue that I really struggle with is the lack of comparability between the things that attribution is even reporting on. How does the number of impressions on an ad relating to one event or one resource that you're pushing to a target list correlate to a completely different campaign run in a completely different quarter with a different message and so on. So, okay, you're starting to see what you might think is how much of your revenue was down to that campaign and that asset versus that campaign and that asset. But what do you do with that information?
Yeah.
I don't really see people having good, strong plans for how to operationalize that data even when they get it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we've spoken a lot about some issues with attribution, but one thing that I would encourage people to look at is using your own conversations happening in the business, especially with sales, as intelligence to feed marketing.
Yep.
One of my favorite things that you set up for us was the Ask Elephant, like sales discovery consultation call notes back into Slack in a channel that I can see immediately after that call ends. It pulls out the key buying triggers, the key category entry points, like the key services that the buyer was discussing, like key notes from it. These qualitative insights are just absolute gold dust. I mean, like gold dust. So I was able to take a load of those submissions, about 50 of them, feed them through a Claude artifact, actually get data, quantitative data then for each of our offerings and segments, and to analyze at a data level category entry points and buying triggers that our actual leads, prospects in that moment told us. Off the back of that, I know that one of the key category entry points is new marketing leader within like 9 months of their tenure, like will often come to us for our services. Okay, so then how do I then use that information? Well, okay, maybe we can actually find that like new marketing leaders using Zoom info, whatever it is, and then do campaigns based off the back of that. Like that information is just so useful. And of course you can combine it then with your software attribution data to see if you're seeing similar things and similar patterns. But that for me right now is like where the gold is.
Yeah. If you understand why buyers move in market, why they end up talking to you currently, what their what their objections and barriers are, what other things they're considering, then you have the building blocks of a pretty good go-to-market, motion. And if you're in a business where there is an outbound sales motion and it is, data driven, then there you have the opportunity to improve, to go from that pull down a whole industry and see what's thrown at the wall, see what sticks, to move towards a very targeted, intentional, intent-based approach, which might see you pull in 5 contacts a month and have a 25%, conversion rate to opportunity, for example. Probably a little bit ambitious, but, unlike what I see sometimes, which is thousands or tens of thousands of contacts, and the conversion rate through to opportunity in pipeline being, 0.0 something.
Yeah.
And the amount of activity that's going into that audience, is really high cost activity for very, very like low returns. So if you can improve the ratio, improve the balance of that by implementing those tactics, you're gonna address that data problem in one way at least.
Yeah.
And make your CRM more valuable, more actionable.
Yeah. It stops the guessing ultimately. Like you can do so much with that information, those recorded sales calls. And this isn't new software at all. Like Gong has been around for however long, but it's becoming easier and easier to obtain the data that is happening in like these recorded places and actually extract it into meaningful insights like Ask Elephant does, and we ping it into Slack and then we can take it from there, or doesn't even, it could go anywhere actually and we could do anything with it. And it stops the guessing. Like if sales are asking the right things, then we understand their buyer journey. Like, we understand, oh, how did you hear about like this category? Like, what actually prompted you to come into market? How did you discover this? Like, what made you think about that? Like, you have all of this at your fingertips. If you're already creating a lot of demand and actually capturing buyers, you have leads and prospects coming to you,
Mm.
this will tell you most of what you need to know. It will tell you if you need to shift your messaging, or like if you're rebranding, how you should reposition yourselves.
Yep.
It will feed into like product development. It will just tell you so much. Like, it's just
Yeah, it's a very cool.
so cool.
It's a very cool unlock that is really helped by, you know, the innovation that is AI, and the rethinking of things that have, you know, been possible for a long time, but are quite big obstacles. You know, speaking to customers, marketers are always told to talk to customers, you know, and with good reason, makes good sense. But it's actually quite a hard thing to do. You know, finding the time, finding the right time, asking the right questions, doing it enough, you know, getting permission, getting introduced. These are all barriers that can really prevent you from being able to do that very simple, very effective thing. It's not dissimilar to creating a case study. We all know how bloody hard it can be to create a case study sometimes. It's like talking to customers can be hard. Thanks to, you know, call recording systems that are smart and, you know, show up when you need them. Thanks to AI's incredible ability to process, you know, information at transcript length, and then software's ability to connect it to other systems. Suddenly you've got this, essentially this researcher at your fingertips. And I still think that Winter is an incredible product that does incredible things, and would, you know, all would be wise to consider it to go out into the not in market audience and understand that type of buyer. But here you have a researcher that's working on every call, updating your intelligence, updating your insight. And that's really, really, really excellent. And if businesses haven't looked at implementing that sort of thing, we would say don't hesitate.
Yeah. And unlike software attribution, where we mentioned earlier, often people will say, oh, but I'm not sure we really trust that data. Well, this is what your buyers are saying. Like, this is word for word what they're saying.
Yeah. Very credible.
So
very...
it's up to you if you want to trust that or not, but there's kind of no denying that they have said something.
Yeah. I mean, judgment is always required. You know, I wouldn't necessarily base the product roadmap exclusively on what buyers are saying on calls. There's still judgment required, but the information is coming from a source which is not, by definition, missing the origin. Like it's not like attribution data, which is lacking a big part of what's going on. The conversation with the buyer is the conversation with the buyer. They will tell you whatever they think is driving the discussion. So super powerful.
Indeed. Okay. Do we have any other points, or should we round things off?
Don't think we've got any additional data frustrations to air, so we can round it up, I think.
Yeah, and I think we've covered off some solutions there, like how to actually use software attribution, the other things you can be looking at, and ultimately it's up to you to make the decision based on, like, surround yourself with the data that you can trust, or the best data that you can, and then make the decision on what to do next with that.
And, you know, if you're drowning in data as it is, or contemplating procuring new sets of data, you know, to solve a problem, have a really good think about how you're going to operationalize that data and what its limitations are, and whether it's moving you in the direction of business KPIs and pipeline, or whether it may end up just being a source of frustration for you.
Cool. All right. Let's wrap it up there. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Demand Decoded, and we'll catch you next time.
See you.
Before you go, if all you can think about right now is AI search and how buyers are using it to find products in your category, we should talk. At Blend, we've built a proven framework for answer engine optimization. We tested it on ourselves first and saw 470 high-value prompt appearances 80% citation rate, and a whopping 250% increase in AI source leads. That's real high intent leads who are finding us through AI search. We've since rolled it out to dozens of clients who are now seeing similar results. Our AI service engineers your visibility in ChatGPT, Perplexity, AI mode, Gemini through structured content, schema markup, and continuous optimization, and measurement through our partner Scrunch. If you want to show up when your buyers are asking AI tools for recommendations in your category, find out more about our AEO services at blendb2b.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.